Well, hello there, everyone. Thanks for joining. Let me just get myself sorted here. We had some technical difficulties at Bible study last night and weren't able to do a live stream. So I'm going to quickly give you a recap of what that is for those that weren't able to come and want to be able to know what we were doing and getting through, especially if you've been going with us through Ecclesiastes. So you can follow on and be able to hear all the lessons that we've been doing. From the little splash welcome screen we had there a moment ago, um, another cheesy title from me. There's an old saying we used to say, sort of, oh, that's sweet, or sweet, or maybe you hear it as sweet as, bro. And it's usually in one form or another just a slang way of saying something's great or awesome, or it's amazing. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, this idea of something being sweet, great, awesome in what it is. Maybe, and we'll touch on this a little bit in the text today, but maybe that idea of sweet as, or that's sweet, comes from the idea that sweet things are good, and we like sweet things, and we like to eat sweet things and enjoy them and savor them. So maybe that's where the saying came from. But we can see some of that represented in what we see tonight with Solomon's word to Ecclesiastes. So we're in Ecclesiastes 11. We're going to be looking at the last part of chapter 11 and moving our way into chapter 12. And then next week, the last section of Ecclesiastes. So we're making our way towards Solomon's grand conclusion. And as he's bringing us to that conclusion, he's basically saying here in this section, life is sweet as, bro. So let's have a look. I've got on the side of the screen there, I've got the passage up. I'm just going to scroll up here a little bit. We're going to start here in Ecclesiastes 11, verse 7, and I'm going to read all the way down through chapter 8. Right, so it says, truly, the light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that is coming is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart, and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from your heart, and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim. When the doors are shut in the streets, and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of music are brought low. Also they are afraid of height, and of terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden, and desire fails. A man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, as the spring will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Now, maybe after hearing that, you're a little confused. You say, I thought you said this was about life being sweet. That didn't sound so sweet. Well, we'll get there, and let's take a look at it to see. But what Solomon writes here, and the way that he writes about life being sweet, but also the difficulties of life, is what we've seen Solomon saying all along, in that he's giving us a realistic look at life, what things are really like, but he's also, in that realistic look, getting us to look beyond this life, to see the greater purpose and the greater intent, and what lies beyond the temporal nature of this life. Now, there are lessons for us all to learn here in this passage, but as you can see a couple of times throughout here, he specifically addresses these words to the young, and having them consider what he's saying. So, if we learn the lessons now, then life will be so much sweeter. Now, as we've started in chapter 11 and gone to chapter 12, but I want to look at it a little bit backwards here. I want to start in chapter 12 and then make our way back to chapter 11. So we're going to start here at the beginning of chapter 12, verse 1, and thinking about the idea of remember God now. Because it begins, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Here he reminds us and instructs us to remember God now. This is while we're young, and let's all assume we're young for the moment. What does he mean when he says to remember your Creator? When he talks about remembering the Creator, he's not just saying think about God, as long as he comes to mind. It has much more intent than that. It's similar to, like in Genesis, when we see God say that he remembered Noah while he was in the ark. It wasn't that God forgot Noah or didn't realize what was going on and was finally going to think about him. No, it was much more than that. It's that God put his mind on him to act in what he was doing. And that's what the intent here was, is remember your Creator. It's not just about a thinking of him or an knowledge of him in our thoughts, but to put our mind on God. As this passage progresses through to the end of chapter 12, we see perhaps mainly what that means is that this is about reverence of who God is, fear of God, and an understanding of who God is himself. So here he's not just telling us to think about God when we're young. Right? So when you're young, you say, "Oh, yeah, I can think about God." If I try to be a good person while I'm doing it, if I can keep doing all of my work and pursuing all these other things. But as long as I think about God and at least include God in my thoughts or in my plans in some way, then it's all okay. That's not what he's saying when he says think on God. He's saying put your mind on God. That is, it is a call to seek God when you're young, to seek God. So what Solomon is essentially saying here is the same as Jesus told us in Matthew 6. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. He's calling us to seek God. Now, why to the youth? Because in youth we are full of excitement and adventure and hope. There's enthusiasm and there's energy when we're young. And often, with all of that we've got, often we are prepared to spend all of that energy and hope and excitement on things under the sun, as Solomon described it. And here, he's calling us to more than that. He's calling us, don't use all your energy and your excitement and your hope on what's under the sun and then think, well, later in life I can focus on God. The call is, no, focus on God now. He's encouraging us to use all of the energy and the hope and the excitement that we have on pursuing God. Now, of course, remember, he isn't saying that you can only do spiritual things, that it's only about what's spiritual in what we do. I mean, after all, he spent all this time telling us in the realities of life that there are good things in this life, and God gives us good gifts to enjoy in this life. So we're to enjoy life, and we're experience all the things that we can here in the right ways, but with God as our focus. Now, as we read that, we think, well, after all that Solomon has described here in Ecclesiastes, and all that he's been through, and the experiences he's had, and the things that he's taught us in Ecclesiastes, why does he come here to the end and then in these statements address this to the young? There is, I think, good indication about why in the next phrase of verse 1. So verse 1, hopefully you can see there, it says, "Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them." Here he speaks to the young, and he speaks about the young remembering, pursuing God while you're young to prepare for the future. Now, the statement, it does include the idea of do it before it's too late. That is, seek God before you die or before there's no chance anymore. And so it has that, at least in part to it, to do it before you die, before it's too late. But it's more than that in what he's saying here. What he's saying is, do it before life really gets difficult. As life goes on, you realize that the older you get, the harder life gets. Now, he talks there about the difficult days that are to come. What does he mean by those difficult days? What is he referring to? Well, as you look through chapter 11 beforehand, which we see, and then through chapter 12, he's talking about aging, and that life gets harder as you get older. Now, he's not saying that living godly is too difficult or impossible when you're old, and that if you get saved when you're old and then try and pursue God, then that's an impossible thing because it's too old. He's not saying that at all. But it is harder to change habits. It's harder to just do things when you're older than when you're younger, and you have all that vitality and energy and hope and excitement that is filled in your life. So it's not about the impossibility of it, just that things do get harder. Remember, the reality of life, as Solomon's been showing us these things. Perhaps at the core of what he's saying here is this: what you plant in your life when you're young is what grows when you're old. So the things that I'm going to do when I'm young, and the things I take in, and the things I learn, and the way I change my behavior or behave when I'm young, that is what is going to set the foundation for what happens when I'm older, the way I react to things, the way I handle life and difficulty when I'm older. I mean, we've all heard and maybe even experienced in our own life those times where we know people who they can't even remember the names of their own children when they see them, but they can recall events from their own childhood many, many years ago. Or the people who can't remember what happened in the morning, but can recite with absolute clarity a verse of a hymn or a Bible passage that they remembered or sung so often as they were younger. So what we do when we're young comes out when we are old. And so he's calling us to pursue God before the days get difficult. And so verse 2 through 8 is poetry, really, as he goes through and describes it. He's describing a poetic way. And so there are some differences in the way these are interpreted, or the pictures that people see, because of the poetic nature of it. But essentially, I think what he's describing here is that aging isn't fun. And you look at some of the things that he describes here about what it's like to age. Verse 2 says, while the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. There's describing there, and then further down as well, he talks about in verse 3 where he says, and those that look through the windows grow dim. The dimming of the eyes as we go blind or hard to see with age. The second part of verse 2 there, the clouds do not return after the rain, is kind of a description that as we age, the storms seem to come more frequently. Things get harder, life gets more difficult, and you get through one thing, and as you get through one thing, it seems that the storm clouds come again, and maybe particularly as he's describing here, it's that physical nature of things that our bodies just don't heal and they don't repair like they were when they were young either, do they? It takes longer for these things to happen. He talks in verse 3 about the keepers of the house, which probably has to do with the hands and how they begin to tremble as we get older. And the strong men of verse 3 may describe the legs, given that he's described the hands with, probably with the keepers. Then the strong man may be the legs, that they weaken and cause us to go low, or it just may be that overall frame starts to bow over. There's a couple of places there, like in verse 3, and where he talks about the grinders and the teeth getting weak and falling out. Verse 4 is an interesting one when he says the doors are shut in the streets. He's described a number of things through here, the eyes going dim and the hands and the body getting weak. And this, to me, may be describing, just all of the other parts of the body. As the body just generally gets weaker and unable, we sort of feel it gives that sense of being more and more trapped in the body, especially as aging gets towards its end and things don't work anymore and the body is less capable of doing things, and maybe the mind isn't working as well as it was, and there's this being trapped in your body. Verse 4 continues, when one rises up at the sound of a bird, the older you get, the earlier you seem to wake up and the less sleep you seem to have. I remember my dad saying to him, I'd see him every now and then or things, and say to him, Dad, you're looking tired. And he'd say to me, I didn't sleep that well last night, up a lot, and things. It's coming to you too. It comes to all of us. And he talks about the daughters of music are brought low, probably referring to deafness. We can't hear the music and the voices around us as we could. Also, they are afraid of height and of the terrors in the way. Just that growing sense of fear of being out amongst people, or even particularly, I know we've certainly seen this in our own lives with people, the falling and the hurt and the damage that can come from falling over. Now, verse 6 here, down towards the bottom of the thing, verse 6, it says, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Right now, aging, of course, it comes along, and we know that with aging and with disease and things, we can sense and expect the end is coming and death is coming. But here he reminds us that even when we expect it, the end of life at death is sudden. Here it's like a golden bowl on a silver cord, and that cord breaks and it just falls. Like it doesn't just keep dangling. The cord breaks, it falls, and it breaks open. Or the pitcher in a well that you lower down to get the water, and then you bring it back up, and as either the crank or the rope breaks and fails, and that pitcher of water just plummets to the bottom and falls. It's the suddenness of death. Even when we expect it through the age, when it comes, it is a sudden and shocking thing. Now, those aren't easy things to read, and you're probably sitting here, if you're still with me here, thinking, man, where's this sweet as bit? So far, we've just been talking about how hard it is to get old. And if you're young, you're thinking, well, this isn't sounding great. No, they're not easy things to think about and to read, and it's certainly not easy to consider, especially as you get older. You think about these things more often as you get over. But a wise person, young or old, a wise person understands the reality of life. Because of life in a sin-cursed world, it's hard and it's difficult, and these things are going to come to us all. So Solomon's advice here, and why he speaks to the young and then describes all these things about being old, is Solomon's advice here is seek God before the ravages of life come, because they come to us all. But there is hope, and that's part of, we see these little drops through Ecclesiastes. He speaks just about reality and about the difficulties of things, but there's always these little moments of hope. And so he continues with verse 7 of chapter 12. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was. Right, there's the body, again, the under the sun thing, the reality of life, the temporalness of life. This body, it dies, it goes back to the dust. But the spirit will return to God who gave it. Right, here is hope for the believer, and that's predominantly his focus in his writing. He does give warning, as we'll see in a moment. He does give warning to the unbeliever and those who choose not to seek God. But here, for the believer, with all of this that goes on, and to the eventual death that comes, says, yes, the body is going to go to the dust, but your spirit goes to God. We leave this world and we enter the eternal beyond it. That's why it matters that you remember God now in the day of your youth. Right, so let's go back to the beginning and let's see if we can see a bit more of this hope. So let's go back to chapter 11 and verse 7 here, where he begins, truly the light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. Life is sweet. And here the instruction, the call is to rejoice in the light because life is sweet. That is, learn to love life. So Solomon is, again, trying to help us put everything into perspective as he's bringing us to that conclusion. He says there, truly the light is sweet. And sweet is probably meant to bring to the mind of the reader honey and the sweetness of honey. And even as we think of things that are sweet, some more than others with their sweet tooths and all, but sweetness is something to be savored with enthusiasm. It's usually a treat. It's something to be enjoyed and longed for. You have your dinner, and what do kids are always asking? Can I have dessert now? Can I have my chocolate or sweet? It's something to be savored and to be enthusiastic about. So when he says here, truly light is sweet, it's something that has it tastes good, and it's longed for and savored. There's an enthusiasm about it. Now, an interesting part also about this verse is he's telling us to savor life and to enjoy it and have enthusiasm about life. Is he goes on, he says, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. Now, that's an interesting phrase, I think, particularly here at the end of Ecclesiastes. Because how has Solomon been using the idea or the picture of the sun through his book already? Well, even from the very beginning, he's used it mostly in the phrase under the sun, or about how the sun rises and sets and rises and sets, and goes through that, all indicating the idea of the temporalness of life. That the rising and the setting of the sun speaks to us about the advancing of days and the moving of time. To be under the sun was used as a description of the vanity and the emptiness of earth. That everything under the sun is seen from a temporal perspective. That it's only here for a short while and it's not meant to last. So up to this point, mostly the use of the idea of the sun has been to speak to us about the futility of life, the passing of time, and how short life is, like a vapor. But here in 11 verse 7, he takes the sun and he uses it differently. Now, instead of saying under the sun and speaking to us about its temporalness or using it as the passage of time, he tells us it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. It's pleasant and good now, the sun. The same object, here the sun, can teach us different lessons depending on our perspective. The same object can teach us one thing and then another thing. On the one hand, the sun shows us the brevity of life by marking the passing of time, by marking a boundary between what is above the sun in the heavens, eternal, and what is below the sun, temporal, that boundary, and what is temporal and what is eternal. But the same sun that marks that temporal, eternal boundary and the brevity of life, that same sun is also a source of life and goodness. You know, the sun that rises and sets and reminds us that time is passing is also the sun that rises and gives our body energy with vitamin D, and it fuels the food for the grass, and it takes care of the water cycle, and all this. So much good and so much life springs from the sun doing its thing every day. When we are reminded of the fragility and the shortness of life, it reminds us to celebrate the light, a change of perspective. Enjoy what is there, enjoy what God gives us, celebrate the goodness. We can look at, here, let's say the sun, we can look at the sun and just see it as that passing of time, my days ticking away until the end. And in that perspective, I'm going to see pessimism and darkness and pain. Or I can look up and say, yeah, that sun passes every day, but every day that sun passes, it's giving me life. It's providing good. It's a source of goodness and life for me in the days that I have. So enjoy it. Enjoy it while it's risen. Rejoice in the goodness. Soak in the pleasant warmth of the sun. Learn from life. He goes on, he says, truly the light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. And then verse 8, but if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that is coming is vanity. Again, maybe we're thinking, well, now he's encouraged us to joy and to enjoy life, and now he's back to bringing me back down. Remember the dark days. Why would he say enjoy life and then remember the dark days? Part of learning to enjoy the beauty of life is learning the lessons of the dark days, those difficult times. When I learn the lessons through the cloudy times, through the dark nights, then I learn to enjoy the blessing of the sun more. I can enjoy it because I've learned the lessons that take me through the darkness and help me enjoy the sun and the bright days better. There will be dark days, and he's clear about that. There will be dark days, many of them. And if you don't learn from those, they will quickly overwhelm you. You will quickly be overwhelmed by that, and then all you will see in the sun is the ticking of time, and you'll find those dark clouds come more often. So here we're reminded to savor the light, because there will be dark days, and there will be difficult days. And those days are coming. It also reminds us, I think, as we think about this, that though this life is full of dark days and that we will come to an end, we have hope. See, we have a hope of a risen life through Jesus Christ. We have a hope that in that risen life, we go to a place where the sun doesn't rise and doesn't set. There is no passing of time like that. There is no under the sun, above the sun. But instead, we go to a place that is forever illumined by the light, by Jesus Christ. There is no night. There is no decay of time. We are always in the light of Jesus Christ. So finally, let's think of the last verses here of chapter 9. If he's wanting us to have this sweet life, how can we have a sweet life? Well, here, verse 9 and verse 10 help us understand that a little bit. And again, he brings us back to the young. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Rejoice while you're young. Enjoy your youth, but don't fritter it away. You have so much to use, and there is so much to enjoy in this life, but don't waste it away. Remember, we're seeking God when we're young to help us when we're old. You're setting a foundation in your life when you are young for helping you to live through the more difficult days when you are old. That's done by establishing our heart now. Verse 9 says, as we've begun, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. Right, now lest you think here that, when he says walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, he's encouraging us to a hedonistic behavior. Let's just do whatever you desire, and whatever you see, just go and do it. He gives warning after that, doesn't he, to heed us, that that's not what he means. Right? So he says, but know that for all these, God will bring you into judgment. That is, whatever you do, you're going to be held accountable for. Right? So he's not telling us here, just live this hedonistic life and do whatever. He's reminding us, yes, pursue life, enjoy life, grab hold of life, but remember, you'll be held accountable for what you do with your life. If you chase your own desires, there will be consequences. Now, in the Bible, the heart is usually a description of the place where we think and where we feel, how we respond to life and what we think about life. It's sort of a description of who we are, our perspectives on everything and how we respond. And then the eyes are, much like that phrase we know, like the eyes are the window to the soul. The eyes are often likened to how things get into the heart. It's that window, that entry into the life. So what he's talking here about, when he talks about walk in the ways of your heart, that is, here's what's inside. What are you thinking? How are you feeling about life? And then with the eyes, how are you shaping what is inside? That is, what are you allowing in to shape how you think and feel about life? We need to be careful with what we let in, what we take into our heart. That is the place of our emotions and our thinking and our will, because that will shape and that will set the foundation for how we think and what comes out in the future. So seek God while you're young. Now, he goes on with some important advice to continue about how to live that. So you want to have a sweet as life? Seek God when you're young. Fill your heart. Take in things that are good and beneficial. But while you seek God while you're young, it means that there's going to have to be yes to some things and no to other things. But if you're going to say yes to God and rejoice and have a life that is sweet as, then you need to say no to the things that will damage. So verse 10, therefore, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. We have to put away the things that are going to damage. We have to say no to the things that are going to ruin our soul. We have to say no to the things that are going to come into our heart and cause damage and hurt and pain, and pessimism, darkness. Paul says the same thing in Ephesians and in Colossians and in so many of his epistles when he uses the idea of put off and put on. Right? In Ephesians 4, he says that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. This put off, put away, say no to the things that are going to destroy you. Say yes to, put on the things that are going to build you up, to make you godly, to bring joy and gladness in life. Remove sorrow or vexation. That is, take away the things in life that bring grief and anger and irritation and offend. And so, this brings us right back to where we started. When I put away evil, what do I do? Ecclesiastes 11 verse 10. Therefore remove sorrow from your heart, and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come. So, what do? I put off those things. I say no to those things that bring sorrow to my heart and evil to my flesh, and I say yes to seeking God, pursuing God. Now, Solomon never tries to trick us into believing that life will be easy. He's been honest the whole way through the book of Ecclesiastes, showing us the reality of life, being realistic about how life is hard, the temptations of life, the things that go on. And yes, there are things that seem to bring joy but then disappear. So he's been honest in showing us the reality of life. And he's honest in telling us it will have many dark days, that the days of darkness will come. But he's also been honest in telling us, even through the dark days and even through the difficult things of life, rejoice in the light. Enjoy the goodness that God has. Embrace the sun. Embrace the goodness, the joy of this life that comes through pursuing God. That's a short examination there of Solomon's thoughts. We'll come as he leads us now into his great conclusion. Next week we're going to get to that great conclusion from verse 8 of chapter 12 through the end. In the meantime, let's take in these lessons. Let's take in these lessons that yes, life is hard, especially as we age. So choose now to remember the Creator of your youth. I'll see you next time.